Today's question is all about video cards and VRAM. Chase comes in and asks, with VRAM being all the talk these days, I'm not going to try to pronounce what he wrote there, would love a revisit or your thoughts on the 1080 Ti versus the 2080. Buy Windows 10 Professional for $15, activate instantly online with Microsoft, and keep it forever. Don't pay full price. Get the best deal from our sponsor, URCD Keys, using our link in the video description below. Full details on how this amazing deal works at the end of the video. Well, that's a 1080 Ti. This is not a 2080. We'll get there. Two cards at release were essentially the same performance. Mostly true, with the 2080 eventually pulling ahead due to driver optimizations. Fine wine technology is not AMD exclusive, and perhaps now behind the 1080 Ti in games that use more VRAM at higher settings. An interesting case of bouncing back and forth of GPUs. Don't side grade. The choice is not 1080 Ti or 2080. Now, I understand that at launch, price-wise, it might have been. Although the 1080 Ti was being discontinued and discounted, and it really wasn't. But from a performance point of view, I get where the question's coming from. Because the 2080 is, give or take, similar in performance to a 1080 Ti, but it has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. The 1080 Ti has 11. The 2080 Ti has 11. You do not cross-shop a 2088 gig with a 1080 Ti 11 gig. If you are the top-end card buyer, and of course the 90 series didn't exist for these two generations, the 1080 Ti and the 2080 Ti were I'm ignoring the Titan cards, which were never marketed to consumers. These were the top-end cards of the generation. If you're a top-end card buyer, don't look at not top-end items. Like, if you're going to buy a Rolex, buy a Rolex. Don't go, well, that one's almost a Rolex for almost a Rolex price. I mean, Breitling watches are nice, and they cost less than Rolexes. But outside of watch aficionados and pilots, nobody knows what a Breitling is. Everyone and their mother knows what a Rolex is. If you're going to spend stupid money on a watch, just buy the one everybody knows. I know it's a bit gaudy, and, I know that, okay, that's getting off track. A Philippe Patek is a way nicer watch than a Rolex, but, the average person doesn't know that. So, if you're looking at these two cards, okay, to answer the simple question, yes, the extra VRAM in the 1080 Ti is starting to really make a difference. However, it doesn't have the performance to use it, so it's sort of irrelevant. The games and the situations where you would set 1440p, ultra detail, and Hogwarts, great. You want the VRAM. A 1080 Ti is not going to do that. Funny thing is, I say that, I haven't actually tested that. It's not going to do that. Somebody feel free to prove me wrong with a link down in the video description below, but it's not. Even a 2080 Ti is probably going to struggle to do that. I do think the 11 gigs of VRAM on the 2080 Ti will give it some legs. I think the 11 gigs of VRAM on the 1080 Ti does not. It helped in the past. It gave it a little bit of buffer. It helped at 4K because, you would have used these cards at 4K back when they launched, or 1440p, but they were perfectly good 4K cards for the games that existed at the time. Did you ever really need 11 gigs of VRAM on these? No, probably not. More on the 2080 Ti, which is what makes the 12 gigs of VRAM on the 3080 Ti really stupid, because that card is aging like milk for what the 3080 Ti launched at. Now, the 3080 launched at $700 with 10 gigs of VRAM, which is less than these, but that the 3090, but that was $1,500. NVIDIA has just been dumb lately. I'm sorry. Their cards and their VRAM configurations are so ridiculous. The 4070 has 12 gigs of VRAM. Would I shock everybody by telling everybody that the 4070 is a 1080p card? But Tech, I saw benchmarks at 1440p. It runs basically all current games at 1440p pretty well. 60 frames per second in the AAA games, 100 frames per second in mid-range games and older games, and 150 to 200 frames per second in esports and other indie titles. What do you mean 1080p card? Do you buy a new video card every year? Do you upgrade your video card as soon as they release anything new? Do you buy a video card to play games in the rearview mirror? Because while a 4070 will do all those things, so will a 2080 Ti. So will a 3080. Okay, 2080 Ti is not quite as fast, but to the people who make that argument, yeah, it will. When I offer video card advice, I am looking forward, and I'm typically looking 4 years forward. In my opinion, and you can disagree with me, it's okay, but of course, if you look at what people seem to own, the 1060 is still extremely common. The RX 580 is owned by millions. I believe most people buy a video card and keep it on average 4 years. Some people upgrade after 2, some people upgrade after 3, some people don't upgrade for 5 or 6 years. If you're going to keep a card for 4 years or longer, I want to know not what it plays today, but what is it likely to do in 4 years' time. In 4 years' time, a 4070 will be at best a 1080p card for new at-the-time games. Now, to anybody who says, what, 4 years, what are you talking about? 1080p, it'll still do 1440. It's a 1440p card. This is 2023. 4 years from now is 2027. You cannot tell me that a 4070 with 12 gigs of VRAM today will play whatever is the newly released AAA games in 2027 at 1440p without any issues with VRAM or performance. Now, that doesn't mean there's no games that will release in 2027 that will not play on that card at 1440p. Of course there will. There's always games that play that are not that hard to run. Hogwarts Legacy, Cyberpunk, Elden Ring. There are Jedi Survivor's more of a disaster on its own merits, but there are always games like that that are just going to destroy your current card. You need an upgrade. The 2080 Ti launched in 2018. That was 5 years ago. Anybody who thought $1,200, yes, I don't launch for $1,000, but most of them were $1,200. Anybody who was okay to pay $1,200 5 years ago to get epic gaming performance is not now going to be happy with a 2080 Ti. Unless your computer needs have completely changed, your games have completely changed, you've bought no new games, and you just said, you know what, I've gotten off this train. But if you do that, with all due respect, are you really watching these videos? I mean, thank you if you are, but are you watching these videos? The user who bought this should have a 4090. And if you find that distasteful and disgusting, an RX 7900 XT for $800, which is arguably a much better value for the money, but 4090 is fast. The 1080 Ti is a little bit harder to say because that launched for $700, and that was back when the top-end GPU prices were saying. The 2080 Ti started it, then the 3090 launched for $1,500, and it is what it is. But what people bought these... The 1080 Ti today, this launched in 2017, actually launched a year later. The 2080 Ti came out at launch, which is how they justified the higher price. The 1080 Ti is still a solid gaming card today. 1080p, high detail, almost anything. 1440p, high detail, almost anything. Okay, it's kind of fallen apart there, but only very recently. But if you bought a 1080 Ti, the games you played in 2017 and the games you play today are not the same. Cyberpunk on a 3090 at 1440p ultra ray tracing versus just ultra detail with no ray tracing at 1440p on a 1080 Ti is not the same experience. And so to answer Chase's question about VRAM, I think that it's sort of water under the bridge because the 2080 with 8 gigs launched in 2018. This launched in 2017, and anybody who bought either one of them is due for a replacement. And if you don't, you have to change your expectations of video cards because your card isn't what it was when you bought it. And so it's either time for a new one or it's time to change your standards, which is fine. If you say, look, I'm okay to play with my 2080 with 8 gigs at 1080p at high detail and not run ultra textures because I don't have the VRAM. Hey, it is your computer. You run it any way you want. 4 years is a nice upgrade cycle. Card comes out, use it 4 years, buy the one that comes out then. If you buy a 4070 today with 12 gigs of VRAM, in 4 years, a 6070 should be out, hopefully with more than 12 gigs of VRAM. I shouldn't even have to say that. It sounds so ridiculous, but whatever. So a 6070 will come out. You'll skip the 50 series. And if you're okay to play at 1080p, great. But tech, I want a 1440p card. Great, buy a 4090. For 1440p? Not today. For the next 2 years, you do not need a 4090 to play at 1440p. But from year 3 and 4, you will. Look at the 3090 today. The 3090 is in its 3rd year of release. It's a great 1440p card today. It's not really a 4K card anymore. I mean, yes, it is for a lot of games, but not going forward. For 4K, you buy the highest end card every 2 years and you just don't look at the price too hard. 4K is hard to do. Looking for a Windows 10 or 11 product key, but you don't want to spend $100 to $200 for it? Our sponsor, URCD Keys, provides discounted Windows keys at amazing prices. $15 for Windows 10 Professional, $21 for Windows 11 Professional, and just $60 for Microsoft Office 2021 Professional Plus. These product keys are the real deal. They activate directly with Microsoft Online, link to your Microsoft account, and they work forever. For Windows, you simply go to Settings, Update and Security, Activation, click Change Product Key, paste the key provided by URCD Keys, and in seconds, you're activated with Microsoft. For Office, go to setup.office.com, sign in with your Microsoft account, paste the product key provided by URCD Keys, and then download Office 2021 Pro Plus directly from Microsoft. Remember to use the discount code TD20 to save 25% off the already deeply discounted prices and support our channel at the same time. We have been using product keys from URCD Keys for almost 5 years now without any issues and encourage you to do so as well.